What began as a private royal dinner was never meant to make headlines until it did. Behind the gilded doors of Balmoral, King Charles sat at the head of a family gathering that would go down in history. What happened next wasn't a toast, nor a celebration, it was an execution. The Queen Consort's family, blindsided. And it all unraveled over dessert. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The guest list for the night had been meticulously curated, small, intimate, and deeply intentional. Balmoral Castle, known for its seclusion and quiet power, became the unexpected stage for one of the monarchy's most devastating internal reckonings. Even Charles's closest aides were left in the dark about the dinner's true purpose. Only those the king wanted present had received an invitation, and notably, several senior staff members who usually attended such events were asked to remain absent. That alone should have signaled something was amiss, but no one dared question the king. Camilla entered the room with an air of confidence. She believed the night was in her favor, perhaps a reaffirmation of her family's growing stature within the royal ecosystem. After all, her children had become deeply embedded in the monarchy's charitable ventures, and whispers inside the palace suggested Charles had no intention of undoing that quiet influence. Her smile, warm and practiced, met little resistance at first. But as the courses came and went, so did the warmth in the air. Something had shifted. The usual light-hearted banter was gone, replaced by a chilling silence. Charles's face betrayed something colder than disappointment. It was resolve. He spoke little during the first half of the meal, nodding mechanically, offering no real engagement. Even when Camilla attempted to draw him into conversation, he barely responded. Every time she laughed or mentioned her son's latest project, Charles's eyes hardened further. His silence became louder than any words. It was then, just as dessert was being served, that the room fell into a deeper hush. No glasses clinked, no forks moved. And then the king, with deliberate precision, rose from his seat. His voice cut through the silence. Not angry, not even emotional, just final. He announced that effective immediately, all positions held by Camilla's family within the royal trusts would be dissolved, titles revoked, roles terminated, influence withdrawn. What had taken years to build was erased in minutes. The stunned expressions around the table were only rivaled by Camilla's own. Her lips parted slightly, but no words came out. Her family, flanking her on either side, looked as though the floor had dropped from beneath them. One of them, red-faced and trembling, stood up, muttered something unintelligible, and stormed out. Camilla didn't follow. But what forced Charles to turn the knife on Camilla's family, and why now? Long before the royal dinner, a secret meeting took place without Camilla. Advisors warned Charles of a looming scandal, one buried in the financial trails of Camilla's relatives. And while the king appeared composed in public, behind palace walls, he was preparing for a purge. It began with a plain envelope, no crest, no seal, just a name scrawled across the front in the unmistakable hand of Charles's most trusted aide. Inside, a dossier thick with damning details. Transactions, receipts. Whispers turned into documents. An anonymous insider had sent it directly to the king's private secretary. The name that appeared most often within its pages was Camilla's son, trailed closely by a nephew whose dealings had long skirted the edges of propriety. The implications were clear. Funds tied to royal trusts had allegedly been redirected, obscured, and profited from in ways that could explode into public disgrace, if leaked. It was no longer a question of whether the monarchy could withstand another scandal, it was whether Charles was willing to let it happen under his reign. The timing could not have been worse. The crown's charitable arms, painstakingly rebuilt over decades, stood at risk. The public's trust, already eroding with every headline, could not survive another breach of integrity. Charles summoned a private circle of senior advisors, men and women who had been with him long before the crown rested on his head. The discussion was brutal. Some demanded an investigation. Others, fearing exposure, recommended an immediate, quiet severing of ties. No trials, no noise, just erasure. And still, Charles hesitated. He had made a promise to love and protect not only Camilla but the family she brought with her. But promises made in love don't always survive in power. He paced for days, isolating himself from official engagements, consulting no one outside his inner sanctum. Camilla, unaware, continued to move through palace life with confidence, not sensing the tectonic shift beneath her feet. But for Charles, the decision became inevitable. The institution had to be preserved, even if it meant sacrificing the very people his heart once welcomed. In a handwritten note sealed in his own ink, Charles gave the order. There would be no press releases, no public statements, no room for rebuttal. It would happen quietly, swiftly, and without emotion. Their names would be removed, their roles terminated, their access gone. The illusion of unity would remain intact, but the structure beneath would be forever altered. But as Camilla's family remained oblivious, Charles began orchestrating a masterstroke that would shatter their place in the monarchy. Camilla didn't enter the palace alone. She brought a family legacy, not of royalty, but of reputation. From country clubs to corporate boards, her relatives slowly found seats of influence. But was it loyalty or leverage that got them there? From the very beginning, Camilla's integration into royal life was never just about her. It was about those who came with her, who benefited from her ascent, who learned how to walk the thin line between public duty and private gain. Her children, particularly Tom Parker Bowles, navigated the upper crust of society with ease. A successful food writer and television personality, Tom's image was carefully curated, casual, affable, relatable. But behind the scenes, his proximity to the throne gave him access that others could only dream of. Invitations flowed, partnerships emerged, and quiet deals were signed. The royal charities, once reserved for seasoned insiders or those with direct lineage, slowly began to include names from Camilla's side of the family. Their presence at events, their signatures on board papers, their influence in decision-making, it all grew quietly, subtly, until it became a norm no one dared question. Yet, within the palace walls, whispers were already beginning to turn into conversations. William, ever protective of the institution and the legacy his mother left behind, reportedly began raising concerns in private. The blending of families was one thing, leveraging that blend to build personal empires was another. His relationship with Camilla's children remained cordial but strained. Politeness masked unease. He saw what others refused to acknowledge, a slow corrosion of the boundaries that had once kept monarchy and business apart. Catherine, always precise in her observations, noticed it too. Though she rarely spoke publicly about her reservations, those closest to her knew that her silence wasn't consent, it was calculation. The truth was, the idea of a blended monarchy looked good on paper. It symbolized modernity, inclusivity, progress. But behind the scenes, it was becoming a mess of conflicting loyalties, overlapping interests, and silent power struggles. The royal brand, built on centuries of difference, tradition, sacrifice, and separation from commercial entanglements, was now entangled in a web that was never supposed to exist. The cracks had formed, and though the public saw only curated smiles and well-rehearsed waves, behind palace gates, trust was fraying. Camilla may have earned her place beside the king, but the price of bringing her family with her was beginning to show. But when private influence turns public liability, even the Queen Consort's family isn't untouchable. Royal trusts aren't just about tradition, they're about power. And in recent years, Camilla's family quietly stepped into roles that came with control over vast assets. But once Charles began tracing the money, what he found left him reeling. The monarchy's financial ecosystem is a fortress built on discretion. From the Duchy of Lancaster to legacy foundations, every pound that passes through royal hands carries weight far beyond currency. It funds influence, it builds alliances, and in theory, it protects the sanctity of the crown. But within that fortress, Camilla's relatives had carved out quiet spaces of control spaces no one fully noticed until it was too late. Her nephew had landed a consultancy position tied to one of the lesser-known trusts. Her sister was listed as a non-executive board member on a royal-affiliated foundation. Appearances suggested service to the crown, but the ledgers told another story. It started with consultancy payments, modest at first, easily explained, easily buried. But they grew. Contracts with vague deliverables, payments made to shell entities. And then came the media deals, production agreements, and content licenses tied to projects that never materialized. The amounts weren't astronomical, but they were symbolic. They signaled something deeper, that access to royalty was now being monetized, subtly, strategically, and with disturbing consistency. A palace staffer, long loyal to Charles's internal counsel, flagged a series of inconsistencies. At first, it was dismissed as a clerical oversight, but the pattern wouldn't go away. The numbers kept surfacing, and soon they formed a trail. That trail led to the king's desk. A private briefing was arranged, no press secretaries, no advisors with outside affiliations, just a core team sworn to protect the institution. When the documents were laid out, there was no shouting, no accusations, just cold, suffocating silence. Charles read every line, every name, every amount, and with each page, the illusion of control shattered. The monarchy, which he had worked so carefully to modernize and protect, was being used as a silent funnel, not for national service, but for private gain. The betrayal wasn't loud, it was quiet, but it echoed all the same. And then came the question Charles had no choice but to ask himself. Had his silence made him complicit? He hadn't approved the appointments, but he hadn't stopped them either. He hadn't signed the checks, but he'd allowed the system to be shaped by those he trusted through marriage. The optics were devastating. He could no longer claim ignorance, not now, and certainly not as king. The risk to his legacy, especially so early in his reign, was enormous. If this became public, it wouldn't just be a scandal, it would be a reckoning. But removing family from power is one thing, doing it in front of them was another entirely. They expected wine, they received war. As Charles raised his voice for the first time, even the palace staff froze. Camilla's relatives stared in disbelief as the king delivered the decision that would exile them not from the room, but from royal privilege itself. The silence before the storm was deafening. The air at the table had grown heavier with each passing course, tension crackling like static beneath forced conversation. Charles had remained quiet for most of the evening, offering only curt nods and clipped replies. But then, as the final plate was cleared and the wine glasses stood untouched, he stood. No preamble, no warmth, just a quiet but firm tone that instantly cut through the room. Effective immediately, the royal trusts would be undergoing a full restructure. The language was clinical. The meaning was not. Camilla's family would no longer have seats, titles, or influence within the monarchy's financial or charitable networks. Their roles were revoked. Their access was gone. In a single breath, decades of proximity and prestige were wiped away. Camilla's fork paused mid-air, her eyes flicking from Charles to the faces around her, searching for clarity, then for mercy. There was none. She opened her mouth, tried to speak, to question, to halt the unraveling, but Charles didn't meet her eyes. He continued speaking as if she wasn't there, reading from a document that had clearly been prepared long before the dinner. One of her relatives, red-faced and furious, pushed back from the table with a clatter and stormed out, muttering sharp words under his breath. No one followed. No one dared. Camilla sat frozen, lips parted but silent, stunned into disbelief. This was not the man she had known, the man who had defended her, shielded her, lifted her to the throne beside him. This was a monarch, acting to protect something greater than love, greater than loyalty. It was duty, stripped of affection. The Queen Consort was suddenly just a woman watching her family be erased by the man she trusted most. And as the room emptied and the clinking of cutlery gave way to a deafening hush, the emotional fracture between them became visible to all who remained. A silence hung between them heavier than any words could carry. No tears, no accusations, just the unmistakable sense that something sacred had been broken. But what seemed like a professional cut soon revealed itself as something far more personal and painful. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't even speak at the dinner. But insiders claim Catherine, Princess of Wales, had been planting seeds for months, ensuring that when the axe fell, it would land exactly where it needed to. While the spotlight often lingered on Charles and Camilla, it was Catherine who moved quietly through the shadows, observing, listening, remembering. The public saw grace, dignity, poise, but beneath that surface was something far more formidable: strategic patience. She had long endured Camilla's subtle attempts to reshape the monarchy's image, often in her own likeness. From press briefings to public appearances, Camilla's team made calculated moves to amplify her role, sometimes at the expense of Catherine's own initiatives. But Catherine didn't respond with press leaks or public spats. She responded with silence and strategy. Inside the palace, she began reshaping the power structure, not with commands, but with influence. Her involvement in the restructuring of royal charities was gradual but deliberate. Budgets were reviewed, leadership roles re-evaluated, and long-standing patronages shifted quietly under her gaze. William stood firmly at her side, though never in the spotlight. Behind closed doors, he offered her unwavering support. Together, they maneuvered not for revenge, but for realignment, one that would secure the future of the monarchy in the hands of those who put duty above self-promotion. Catherine's closest advisors, many of whom had earned their place through years of quiet loyalty, began redirecting their focus. They no longer served a split monarchy, they followed a vision, and that vision did not include the sustained influence of Camilla's family. Then came the leak, a report suggesting Camilla had blocked a key initiative proposed by Catherine, citing it as unnecessary. It wasn't the content that ignited tensions, it was the intent. The leak wasn't traced, but its timing was telling. By the time Charles began reviewing internal reports about Camilla's family, the groundwork had already been laid. The story wasn't just about misuse of funds, it was about who the public would trust to clean it up. And Catherine understood the rules of survival in the royal house. Never confront directly, never expose yourself to the blow. Let others fall on their own swords, just ensure you're the one holding the scabbard. Her elegance masked precision. Her quiet presence at the dinner masked her victory. She didn't need to speak. She had already spoken, months ago, in memos and meetings and decisions no one noticed until it was too late. And as Camilla retreated into silence, another royal made her move not with power, but with purpose. Anne had always been the monarchy's silent enforcer, unshaken, loyal, and immune to drama. But this time, she chose a side. And the moment she stood from the table and followed Charles into the corridor, the palace knew. The real queen wasn't Camilla. For decades, Anne had been the monarchy's steel spine, never chasing attention, never demanding recognition, but always upholding duty with a ferocity that even Charles struggled to match. She had watched as her brother navigated marriages, scandals, and reinvention. Through it all, she remained the constant, stoic, dependable, unimpressed by theatrics. Her relationship with Camilla had always been cordial at best, restrained by formality, and never warmed by affection. Anne's tolerance was exacting, and one thing she had never tolerated was privilege used for personal gain. So when whispers reached her about Camilla's family entrenching themselves within royal trusts, she didn't explode. She calculated. And when the time came, she acted. Anne had seen this kind of decay before: private interests rotting public trust from the inside. She had witnessed the monarchy nearly buckle under the weight of indulgence and unchecked access. And while others hesitated, she understood the cost of silence. Her endorsement of Charles's decision to cut ties with Camilla's relatives wasn't just approval, it was reinforcement. When Anne stood behind a move, it wasn't emotional, it was final. She made her stance clear in private first, attending closed-door meetings where Catherine's restructuring proposals were dissected line by line. She didn't just support the plan, she sharpened it. And so, when Charles dropped the axe at the dinner, Anne's stillness spoke volumes. She didn't wince. She didn't flinch. And when it was over, when Camilla sat in stunned silence, Anne simply rose from her chair, nodded to Charles, and followed him out of the room. It was a gesture so small, yet so seismic, that the message was unmistakable. The crown stood with the king, not the Queen Consort. More importantly, it stood with principle. Camilla's emotional isolation deepened in the hours that followed. Her family was gone, her influence in question, and now even Anne, perhaps the only royal, with the moral clarity to silence critics, had made her allegiance known. There was no repair, no spin, no quiet apology that could reverse the blow Anne's quiet defection delivered. It was the monarchy, resetting itself, one step at a time. But this wasn't just about family, it was about legacy, and who would inherit the true moral compass of the crown. The headlines never told the whole story. What followed that dinner was a slow, silent implosion. Camilla vanished from scheduled appearances. Her children retreated from public life, and Charles, he began to look like a man haunted by his own justice. Within days of the dinner, whispers began to leak. Camilla had cancelled a string of high-profile engagements citing health concerns, but few believed it. Her absence wasn't a matter of illness, it was retreat, a calculated disappearance meant to preserve dignity in the wake of humiliation. Her usual presence at public events, often beside Charles or representing the crown independently, was suddenly erased. Behind palace gates, aides scrambled to adjust appearances, reshuffle speaking roles, and remove her name from upcoming programs. In her place, Catherine and Anne stepped forward, filling the void without acknowledging the reason it existed. The monarchy had quietly begun to move on. Meanwhile, the media caught the scent of something deeper. Unnamed sources hinted at irreparable fractures within the royal family. Papers speculated on a royal rift, fueled by the sudden distancing of Camilla's family from all official functions. When Camilla's son released a cryptic message to a tabloid, "Sometimes silence speaks louder than titles," the firestorm erupted. The phrase was vague, but the timing was deliberate. It wasn't a denial. It wasn't a defense. It was a provocation. And it was enough to divide public sentiment. Some rallied to Camilla, portraying her as the victim of palace politics, while others firmly backed Catherine, praising her quiet poise amid chaos. For Charles, the weight of the decision began to show. He kept up appearances, but the strain was impossible to hide. His speeches grew shorter, his expressions more strained. Tabloids began publishing speculative stories about his declining health and emotional fatigue, questioning whether the king had sacrificed too much for the sake of order. Internally, staff described him as withdrawn, often alone in his study for hours. The man who had spent decades fighting for his place on the throne now seemed isolated by the very crown he'd inherited. And yet, there was no turning back. The palace communications team, sensing a shift in public mood, launched a quiet rebranding effort. Photographs of William and Catherine increased in frequency. Stories of Princess Anne's tireless service resurfaced. The monarchy's focus subtly redirected to the future, one of tradition, stability, and generational leadership. The narrative was no longer about unity, but survival. Camilla became a shadow, her once prominent role erased without formal explanation. No statements were issued, no interviews granted, just silence, a calculated silence that said everything. But before the world could adjust to the silence, a final blow landed, one that made the crown tremble. Left on her nightstand, unsigned, but Camilla knew exactly who wrote it. A letter that didn't accuse, didn't threaten, but explained everything. The betrayal, the decision, the future without her family in it. And in that final line, just 5 words that broke her completely. For days following the dinner, Charles and Camilla had barely exchanged a word. The corridors of Clarence House were quiet, not from routine, but from rupture. He kept his distance, attending to state matters, holding audiences, fulfilling duties while she remained in a private wing, surrounded by silence that screamed louder than confrontation. Then, one morning, as she returned from an early meeting with her aides, she found the envelope, cream-colored, heavy. No crest, no name. But the handwriting on the front, a script she had known for decades, made it unmistakable. She took it to her room, locked the door, and began to read. There was no anger in Charles's words, No cold dismissal, just the weight of inevitability. He wrote that what transpired at the dinner was not a betrayal, but a burden, that for weeks he had wrestled with the knowledge that the crown was being weakened not by enemies outside, but by shadows within. He explained that while he had once promised to protect her and those she loved, his first vow, his truest obligation, had always been to the institution, and that vow required sacrifice, a sacrifice she never expected to be asked to make. The letter did not linger on the scandal or the specifics. It didn't need to. It spoke instead of legacy, of image, of the delicate thread that binds monarchy to its people. He mentioned the erosion of trust, the rising whispers, the cracks appearing in the very foundation they had tried to rebuild. And he admitted, with quiet finality, that his decision had not been made in anger but in mourning the version of themselves they could never return to. He had chosen duty, and with it, he had severed something sacred. At the bottom of the letter, beneath the formal tone and restrained emotion, were 5 words, a sentence not meant to inflame but to end. Forgive me. I never could. Not a request. Not a confession. Just the truth. Later that morning, a palace staffer would glimpse Camilla standing outside Clarence's house, her head down, her shoulders trembling not in fury, but in heartbreak. No press release followed. No explanation was ever offered. But those 5 words became the quiet tombstone of a royal bond now broken. And with that final blow, a new era quietly began, one without compromise, one without shadows. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.